Good. Well, pleasure to be here. My name's Jesper Hornberg. I'm the CEO of Global Resilience Partnership. Here with Atlantic Council, we're very, very pleased and happy to have the Resilience Hub at New York Climate Week again. It's a special day that once a year we can open the doors and have conversations that are hopefully uncomfortable, hopefully forces you to leave your comfort zone entirely so that we can explore truths, facts, science together. For those of you joining us for the first time, the Resilience Hub is home for adaptation and resilience. It's the home, we like to think of it. We have the Resilience Hub in New York. We also have at COP and London Climate Action Week. The space has become recognized as home for bringing governments, businesses, financiers, scientists, youth, and frontline leaders together to test ideas, stress check solutions, and most importantly, to build trust among people that don't usually speak to each other. We at the Global Resilience Partnership and Atlantic Council, and you will see Atlantic Council a little bit later in the program today, are honored to serve as the Hub's managing partners. This year, we are working hand in hand with the COP30 presidency to help drive the activation agenda. Ensuring resilience is not just a background track in Belém, but a defining line that runs through it. In the past summer, if the past summer hasn't taught us anything about the need for resilience, I don't really know what would. It's not an abstract concept anymore. It's something that we really need to take seriously. Just a few weeks ago, New York City faced record-breaking heat, triggering emergency measures across the city. Hospitals, transport, and energy systems were all tested. And it reminds us that resilience is about people's daily lives. It's not something that can happen in some distant future. This year is pivotal for many reasons. What I just mentioned is obviously one reason, but as we head into COP30 in Belém, the call is clear. We must turn evidence into action, ambition into delivery, and commitments into systems that last. And today's programming is designed exactly for that. Across the day, we'll move from stress testing the resilience science must-knows, and a little bit here, to scaling nature-positive engineering solutions, to exploring how to make adaptation finance truly investable, and finally, to elevating health as a central pillar of resilience. Each of these conversations is about one thing, shifting from talk to action, shifting action to traction, getting stuff happening on the ground. So as we open this hub today, I invite you to lean into the discomfort, to the tough questions. You ask them, you answer them, to connect across the silos. We know that the problem that we're facing is not divided into silos, right? So why should we? The problems that are coming at us, they're not dividing up in different departments. It's just happening, and it's all connected. So we shouldn't, in our response, try to solve it by being in silos either. Each of these conversations is about one thing, shifting from talk to traction. Because what we test, what we refine and build together here will flow directly to Belém and COP30. Shaping the granary of solutions that the presidency had put forward. In that spirit, I'm delighted to introduce my first high-level guest. If I could please have Wanjiro come up on stage. Thank you. Thank you. Should we sit? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So they scripted us. I think the reason for that is that otherwise we might be too funny or something. I don't know. So we changed the script. So let's go to what we discussed.
Yes.
Yes.
Flipping the script.
Dr. Wanjiro Kamau-Rutenberg, Africa Managing Director of the Alliance of Biodiversity International in Seattle. It's a good thing they scripted that because there's no way I could remember all of that.
It's such a mouthful.
Yeah, it's long. It's like our web page. globalresiliencepartnership.org. I mean, I break my fingers when I type it.
Is that your email address too?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
But no one forgets.
This is true.
Yeah. So we have some good questions here, but then we talked just before, and we came up with another thing maybe to explore. That obviously fits nicely in this, so Sibel, please don't worry.
We're so badly behaved
yes.
because literally this morning I'm like, well, you know
don't want me giving a speech for 10 minutes. That's so boring. Let's do something different. I'm so glad. I'm so glad.
We're going to talk about, you all heard, we're going to talk about resilience science. We're going to talk about the importance of people, human-centric and so on. But one thing that I've struggled with for a long time, and this might be just in my head, that I have limited abilities to understand. So I'd like to hear your take on it. Mm-hmm. We look at developing countries, and now we're talking about Africa in particular. Why do we have a different set of expectations on what should work in Africa compared to the rest of the world? When you think about time frames, how quickly things should happen, if you think about cost of capital, because there are huge investments that have been made in the rest of the world over many, many years, and we're living in the comfort of those investments now. And we're not really allowing that to happen in a developing context.
Oh, we're going to go there. I was telling Jasper, I'm really glad my boss isn't here, because then we'll see what happens with the recording, but I can...
Oh, this is live streaming.
Someone's on Twitter going, log in now, when Tira's about to run her mouth. Okay, it is frustrating, because I think we do have a different set of expectations for developing countries. Here's how I see it. Let's be fair. When you can sit here in New York and run AC, like most of the buildings here, and especially the US has this problem, especially of air conditioning the daylight out of everything, while at the same time expecting the world's poorest people to pay the price for the comfort that is experienced in the West. And it's unfair. Well, how did we end up there? I think you can't start to understand how unfair that is without understanding the history of colonial exploitation and expropriation. And one of the things that worries me is that the ways we're thinking about addressing the challenges of climate change continues to follow the logic of a colonial logic of appropriation and exploitation. There's a lot of the ways we're thinking about addressing climate change that is putting the cost and the burden on the world's poorest, most marginalized peoples, and especially those who really didn't cause the problem, while those whose ancestors did cause the problem continue to enjoy the benefits of incredibly well air-conditioned rooms and all of the things that we know are part of the problem, the food waste, the lifestyle decisions that got us into this mess. There's an expectation that who should pay for it is still those at the margins. Now, I think we get to an interesting place in the conversation where we start saying to, especially the BRICS, and sorry, it's probably not politically correct to say this, but I love how India shows up to the conversation saying, we didn't cause it, y'all did, and so you all don't get to lecture us on whether we get to burn coal or we have an obligation to pull our people out of poverty. Now, it's an interesting point in the conversation that needs to be forced. I'm not sure that that's where the solution lies. I'm not sure that, say, the argument should be for those of us, and let me speak as an African, that we should be able to pollute as much as everyone else's ancestors did. We're all going to fry ourselves, but take several seats before you come at Africans saying, oh, we need to negotiate things a certain way.
Thank you. So in that context, when we're talking about resilience, the most resilient systems are those that we say I'm saying this to you, and I want you to respond. The most resilient systems are those that redistribute power and resources, and that does not reinforce existing inequalities.
Yes, but is the West really serious about that? The description of what that system should be, I completely agree. But are we having an honest conversation? That's where we get stuck. And here, I'm again taking a hardline position as an African. Don't ever let me be a negotiator in these, right? If I were sitting as a negotiator, as an African negotiator at some of these conventions, my stance would be, we didn't cause it. You'll continue enjoying the benefits of exploiting nature, and you're expecting our poorest people to pay the price, yet our obligation is to pull our people out of poverty. Bottom line, as Africans, governments have an obligation to pull our people out of poverty. Okay, now, that is the point of departure. We want to redistribute power. Let's actually then redistribute power. What does that look like when we're having an honest conversation?
Thank you. Final question. Africa is, I've lived in Kenya since 2010. Africa is a powerhouse of resilience solutions, really is, and is contributing to innovative, actionable projects on the ground. Respond.
Yes, we are. There's certain things that are happening on the continent that don't get mentioned or seen, or that are not in the public narrative in this part of the world. That is really unfair and unfortunate. For example, Kenya is 90% renewable energy, right? How many of you all knew that? That's not, there's certain, and we're not talking about resilience just from the place of what happens in our rural communities, because there's also that, what does this conversation about resilience look like when we're not exoticizing Africans, when we're not just talking about the exotic Africa of the exotic Africa of our imagination, and of National Geographic, but the Africa that is where you have countries that are running on 90% renewable energy. What is it that you can learn from here? How does the conversation between the North and South shift when there's a level of respect for the innovations that already exist?
Thank you. Sibel, do I have time for one more? Okay.
Ish.
We're going to get back to you then.
Okay.
So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Oh.
I think this was better than just me ranting off a speech. I think we did better.
I'm sure it would have been lovely, but this was more fun for me. Thank you. Well, thanks for setting the stage so powerfully. Yeah, it's uncomfortable, right? It has lots of hard stuff in it, and that's the material that we need to work with when we address these things. We're going to shift gears a little bit, but just a little bit, because we already talked about the resilient science must-knows. It's on our websites in various briefings, but it's a new initiative, and we haven't launched it yet. It will be formally launched at COP30, but today we have a bit of a spoiler. So we're going to have two dear colleagues of mine come up here on stage and not just speak to you and go through a PowerPoint presentation, but to actually have a little bit more of a radio host or a podcast kind of conversations. What are the must-knows? Well, in brief, just to prep you for their discussion, it's a science-backed set of insights designed to cut through the noise and help decision makers focus on what really matters for building resilience that lasts. And when we put resilience in here, we also talk about market resilience, business resilience, community resilience. It's all of it. The intention is to give leaders, both government and private sector and community and so on, clear and actionable facts, ideas, potential partnerships, and so on. So, with that, I want to introduce Frank Radosevic from Future Earth. He will guide us through this exclusive dialogue with Sibel Kirosh, who is the Director of Knowledge at the Global Resilience Partnership and a researcher at the Stockholm Resilience Center. Frank, please take a microphone and take this.
Thank you, Jesper. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Please, was it right here? Oh, you sit next to me. I'm not that. There we go. There. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. It's great to be here. As Jesper said, my name is Frank from Future Earth, one of the organizations behind the Resilient Science Must Knows, along with Sibel here, who is one of the driving forces for the report, if I may say so myself. You are the knowledge director at the Resilience Center, as well as a theme leader at the Stockholm Resilience Center. And we're going to be talking a little bit about this report, what it is, what it tells us. We're also going to be opening to questions. So if you have your own questions about the must-knows, we have them up on screen behind us. You can ask away in a few minutes. But first, Sibel, tell us about this report. Give us an overview of it. What inspired you and others to put this together? And what sort of problem or challenge does this report actually address?
Yes, and so first of all, thank you so much, all of you, for being here. And I realized that it is a little bit weird about talking about something that was not even launched yet. But at the same time, we have been sort of like trying to raise this awareness and have a lot of discussions also ahead of the launching, because we also find that there's a lot of richness in that interchange. And you just have it up there like the very, very short sort of like titles. They're still a little bit draft titles of the 9 Resilient Science Must Knows. But so the Resilient Science Must Knows is actually not a report. I would say that it's more than that. So it is an initiative. And it is an initiative lying at the interface between science, policy, and practice. And it came from the realization, and this is like at the Global Resilience Partnership and at the Stockholm Resilience Center as well, we work very transdisciplinary, like with a lot of non-academic partners, and sort of in several dialogues through the years with our partners, we come to a place where we realize that, a lot of people were saying, yeah, we know there's a lot of knowledge about resilience, a lot of scientific knowledge, but it's just very difficult to digest that science, and we all know that. I write them like scientific papers are not are not always the easiest reads, and so sort of and that's when we sort of decided to join forces. And Future Earth has been doing for several years the 10 new insights in climate science, which is like a quite short annual publication that sort of like condenses the new insights from climate science, directed into a quite easy, digestible format to inform decision makers. And we started to play with the idea, can we do the same for resilience science? Much more difficult.
So if I was a decision maker, which I am not, unfortunately, but if I was, and I read this report, how would I act differently after reading it?
Yeah, that's a huge question. But I think that sort of the thing with the Resilient Science Must Knows is that they are focusing on actually systemic change. So not just on like individual interventions of resilience. So they are more sort of like at the systems level kind of resilience. And what they meant to is to really provide a lens that by looking to these 9 things, you can sort of be able to enable, let's say, like an ecosystem for resilience. So I think they are particularly useful for sort of decision makers working at that systemic level. And then they also come from a bit of a different process, I would say. So sort of like a quite sort of diverse and participatory process. I don't know if you want me to talk about it.
Well, I think maybe people can ask you a question about that, because we have some more questions we want to get through first before, if you want to, or do you want to go into it?
I can just say very briefly. Is it okay? I'm talking too much. But basically, one of the special things also with the Resilient Science Must Knows is that it's not just like an in-house initiative. So we actually did a very broad consultation with hundreds of scientists, and we asked them sort of like, if you would be in an elevator 4 minutes with a decision maker, and you would tell them the most essential thing of your resilience research, and these were like science across many fields of resilience, like what would you tell them? And we got actually, about 130 complete responses that then we sort of curated and distilled with the help of a fantastic editorial board. You will meet some of them soon, of sort of 20 world leading scholars in different fields of resilience that help us all the way through the process. And then with this, we also did a literature review, and we did, and I will just finish with that, but it's important to say, because we didn't want this to be sort of like top-down from science saying, do this, or sort of like ivory tower kind of approach. So we actually engaged in several consultations with about, decision makers representing about 150 different organizations through 4 workshops where we showed them the draft list of the must-knows. And we asked them for feedback, right? Like, is this relevant? Should we do something different, sort of along the process? So it was sort of quite an intertwined process. So they were not 9, they were more. But these consultations really helped us refining them, sort of.
Yeah, and one thing that struck me that was interesting in this refining process is that in the end, you come to a definition of resilience where it's not just about bouncing back, and that there's actually instances of bad resilience. Can you unpack that a little bit for us? Resilience isn't just bouncing back, and that it can be problematic or bad at times.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that like this idea that resilience is just about bouncing back or recovery, it's an ideal that I think we can think theoretically it would work if we would have a very stable world, right? But that's not what we have. So we have sort of like, a very changing, right now actually rapidly changing sort of field or playing field, a risk landscape that is constantly evolving and that we need to sort of like constantly react to. And so what resilient science says is that resilience is actually a triple capacity. And that's like the capacity to cope, the capacity to adapt, and the capacity to transform. And depending on the type of shock that you are facing or the nature of the crisis that you are facing, you might need one response, the other, right? Or you might even need all 3 simultaneously, but maybe like different parts of the system. Like some you might want to preserve as they are, others they will need to sort of have adaptive strategies to the new environment. And others would be like, they would need fundamental change. And that's where transformation also sort of like comes in. So we talk about this triple capacity, and we actually think it's a quite fundamental, one of the most fundamental must-knows, I would say, that has to do with what is resilience. It's exactly that.
I want to make time for questions from the audience, but really quickly, Jesper mentioned that this will be launching at COP, but there's going to be another part of this called the Road to Action. Can you tell us really briefly what that is?
So as we said, this is not just about a report. It's an initiative, and it's also an initiative that there will be a report launched at COP, but that won't be the end. Actually, we say that that's kind of the start of where we want to take it. So now we have sort of like this synthesis coming from this process, both the science and the consultations. And then we would like to sort of like start the process of engagement with different stakeholders from different sectors, so different types of decision makers, to actually see, how can we sort of like translate this resilient science must-knows into different realities. And so that's something that we're still sort of like scoping and slowly designing, also like in consultations. And if any of you would be interested in engaging with us with that, just please reach out.
All right, thank you, Sibel. We have a microphone in the back. We have time for maybe 2 or 3 questions if you want to raise your hand and say where you are and who you are. Over here, this gentleman in the blue jacket.
Good morning, bom dia. My name is Gaston Kremer. I'm from Fundación Avina, a happy partner of the Resilience Hub. My question for Sibel is, and congratulating for the great work, right, to expand the view on resilience, is if in the study you'll have recommendations to those, maybe not abroad, what to do with it, but some recommendations, for example, in the space of the Rio conventions and the synergy of those conventions, or specifically to the climate, biodiversity, or desertification.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gaston, and nice to see you here. That's a good question. So this first report and the Resilient Science Must Knows, they are, for now, intentionally broad. And they are sort of like, and we do this because we want to have this lens at the systemic level, and we wanted them to be able to be sort of like applied to different types of systems, and that's why we did them broad. And right now, we also didn't want it to have a super long product, right? So right now, and for this first product, we focused really on getting sort of the synthesized essence of these 9. We are not like making so much the connection with different policy processes, for instance, sort of, or we are not going into the next step of already sort of like creating advice or sort of like a concrete, roadmap for a particular sector or for a particular process already in place. That is what we want to do with the Road to Action, okay? So that's why it was a really like a stepwise sort of approach. And so that's what we're planning to do, from COP onwards, sort of, yeah.
We have another question here, yes?
Hi, I'm Allison Rose from the Columbia Climate School. And I just had a question. I understand you're taking this resilience framing, but I wonder how difficult you found it to generalize across different areas like agriculture, food, energy, and things like that.
Great question, yes.
It was a great question. Very difficult. So it has been, so we were very careful, like when we sent out the survey and to the scientists to sort of really do it to networks of different streams in resilient science. And also the editorial board is quite diverse. So everything from like, we have representatives from climate resilience, urban resilience, from sort of communities resilience, more social side, so it was like very sort of broad. But it was a challenge all the time. And also like, how can you make something that could be applied across very different types of systems and still actually say something, meaningful, that is not just like so high level that, it has no interest because everyone already knows. And I think that this level of detail, or the right level of specificity, was very difficult. It was a constant struggle. I think we landed on a compromise that I hope it's satisfactory. But again, like it does not take the need of taking this forward and actually then, test it in a specific, against a specific system, a specific real life case, and actually translate them. So what does it mean in this context, sort of?
I think we have time for one final question right here, and then we'll wrap it up.
No, I want to make you a question.
Hi, I'm Kate Ramsey from Scope Impact. We're a social innovation company working in the intersection of climate and health. And one of my questions is, in terms of the consultations, is how governments were involved and how, because a lot of the decision makers that will matter for this systems change are governments, and how you sort of put yourself in their mindset and their thinking about what they need as one of the main users of this information.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We didn't have a strong representation of like representatives from governments. It was mainly non-governmental organizations, a lot of consultations with the private sector as well, not as much from, well, also like intergovernmental organizations, yes, but not as much from sort of like specific governments. But that's actually a track that we are interested in exploring forward, sort of like for the road to action, to maybe like try to work a bit closer with governments. And now there's like so much like within apps and with sort of like that this could potentially be applied for. Also because that we feel that, you know, we talk about decision makers, right? That's a big pot of people, right? It's like a black box. And, but I think that at the level that the resilient science must knows are, which is again, this kind of strategic systemic level, like that would be a group that is particularly sort of like interesting for testing this across. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for your questions, and thank
no,
you.
I have a question.
You have a question for me.
I have a question.
Oh, okay.
Because you read them.
Yes.
So I'm curious, like, if there was any of this resilient science must knows that actually like capture your attention, or that made you a bit more curious about.
I was very curious about the bad resilience. I hadn't thought about that, and I thought it was quite enlightening to sort of read about that. I also liked Must Know number 6, I believe, about nurturing relationships and connections, but not just any old relationship and connection, but the right relationship and connection, which I thought was a little tricky to sort of know when you have the right relationship and the right connection. But yes, maybe you can explain that in another session later in the day, because we're out of time right now. So thank you very much. A round of applause for Sibel here. Thank you. And I'm going to pass the microphone now on to John Matthews. He's the Executive Director of the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation. So John, please come on.
Thanks so much. Good morning, and thank you. I'm really grateful to be here. I actually want to start off by asking a few questions of you all. I'm curious, raising your hands, like how many of you are from the public sector, that you work in some form of government? How many? A few, not many. That's interesting. How many are from NGOs? A majority. From companies. Also, a large number. That's an interesting mix. How many people are from U.S., Canada, Mexico, from North America? Okay. Also a strong signal. How many of you are based in Africa? Few. Asia. Few. Australia. Okay, we have an Aussie in the back. And in Europe. Like our second group, South America. Okay, interesting. We have a very global mix, but also some clear patterns that I think have emerged too. How many of you work right now on adaptation and resilience issues? How many of you just started on that in the last year? Maybe like 20% of you. That's by itself is very interesting. How many of you have been working on it for more than 10 years? About the same number. Interesting. Well, so my name is John Matthews. I'm with a group called AGWA. We work on water and climate resilience issues. We're about 15 years old as an organization. We're a longtime partner with GRP and real fans of their work. We try to collaborate with them on a wide range of issues. I'd like to start off by actually bringing up our actually all 5 of our speakers, if we can. And if I could have Francis and Rajvi sitting just to my right here. But if all the speakers could come up. And I want to start off with a little bit of a story as they come up to the front. On Saturday, I was at a special philanthropy event that was just focused on climate change. It was hosted by Climate Works. Was anybody else there? Okay, yeah, I do recognize you. Yeah, and 1/4 of the workshops in that day were focused on adaptation resilience, the other 3/4 on really different types of mitigation issues. And it was very interesting to me to think in the first segment here, who is the audience for the Resilience Must-Knows? Before I started working in adaptation resilience, I actually worked as a book editor in Midtown Manhattan for about a dozen years. And one of the first questions that I would ask as an editor is, who is this proposal for? Who's the audience for it? And I was listening really hard in this first segment, who is the audience for the Resilience Must-Knows? And I think like there is a massive audience for these basic ideas. On Saturday, I heard people say things like, we don't even need to start adaptation finance until 2030. Yes, that's the right reaction, an open mouth. We shouldn't be we should be done with all of our adaptation and resilience work by 2050. We won't need to do any more after that. Like, these are fundamental differences in understanding, right, about what A&R needs to become. Mitigation, I think it's fairly narrowly focused. A&R is kind of everything. And that's one of our basic challenges, is it's so big of a concept that it's really hard for people to bring it into themselves. So this segment is trying to make, I think, some of these resilience must-knows something that's really tangible, that we can actually use for the people that we're working with that are saying what I sometimes need to guard my face from having like a very strained, maybe violent reaction to people when they say crazy things like I heard on Saturday. So I think we're also going to see like a tension, hopefully like a synergy as well, between how we talk about resilience science and resilience practice. Where is the kind of emerging knowledge that straddles both of those areas? And how do we really try to elevate it and develop it? And we're going to start off with, thank you. We're going to start off with two practitioners. And they're from different spheres, but they're going to be reflecting on the resilience must-knows. So we're beginning with Francis Bouchard, Managing Director of Climate at Marsh McLennan, and then Dr. Rajvi Joshipura, Senior Coordinator at CIWA. I'd like it if maybe Francis, if you could start off and talk a little bit about how you see the resilience must-knows as relevant, useful, maybe even that there are things that you would like to see more inside of them for your own work.
Great, thank you. And congratulations to everybody who's worked on these. Clearly, a lot of thought, a lot of analysis, a lot of research has gone into this, and I say kudos for anybody who's leaning in on these topics, because we all need to do it. I think I have a slide up here, yeah. And this is to show that, private companies, at least the one I work for, are not waiting for the resilience must-knows in order to get active on this, right? So our framework is a little bit more around our customers, though. So those of you who work for companies understand, as I do, that we don't get to have any impact or play in this space at all if we're not selling something to our clients that they want to buy, right? So we have perhaps a different driver in how we look at this than more academic research. We actually have to have an offering that somebody's willing to pay for. And I guess one thing I would observe is that the dismal science isn't in here too often, is it, right? And we deal with economics every day. I mean, that's our lifeblood. If we don't meet certain economic realities, we don't get to contribute to the adaptation and resilience debate. And we have a lot, as you can see here, to offer. Some of it starts with the core assets that we're trying to protect, or our clients are trying to protect as an insurance provider. But you see that we've also started to identify the system level players, where are setting kind of the rules of the game, where a lot of the exposure is either mitigated or created around the edges. So, you know, as I started to learn more about the resilience must-knows, I kind of went through, you know, okay, here are 9, and then there's a chart, and I can check the box here, check the box. You know, clearly that's not the exercise that the authors are looking for. We are struggling a little bit to be able to say all of the 9 apply to this offering or that offering or that offering, but you can see that hopefully some of these start to wade into the equity issues, some of these start to wade into the diversity issues, some of these start to wade into the agency issues that you so rightfully have identified. But the core ones that I think we are continuing to struggle with as an insurance company and clearly as a society is who pays. We need a buyer for us to be able to provide the capabilities and knowledge and expertise that we think we can bring to this. But there's still a struggle around capturing what we call the resilience dividend in a way that we can spend it today. Because I don't know who else is going to pay for this, and it has to be done. So for me, it was extremely encouraging to see, you know, a lot of focus on not just that there's a payback. I mean, the insurance industry has been creating that payback since the Lloyd's Coffee House, right? Don't send your ship through the Malacca Straits because the pirates are out. Okay, they go around it. Guess what? They saved a whole bunch of money and resources and whatnot. We've been doing this since we started, but there was always someone to pay. And this is what we're struggling with today. So we're working with governments throughout not just the United States, but throughout the world, trying to figure out that part of the equation, because we do struggle. And I guess the last point I'd make perhaps about the resilience must-knows is the tensions that exist. I really, really like the system-level focus because I think that that's the only way to actually drive scale-level solutions. And we got to start to get to scale. Despite the hyper-local nature of adaptation and resilience, somehow we need to have scaled mechanisms. And those are going to have tension with the agency, with the equity, with the diversity, particularly the agency one. I mean, to scale, you really need some tough decisions to be made. And I don't know who's going to make those. It's not going to be us. I really think government is probably the best position to make kind of the ultimate trade-offs. And I found it encouraging to see that was at least referenced in the resilience must-knows, because I think there are times when some entities believe that insurance pricing can solve all risk issues. I'm here to disappoint you. It cannot, because at some point, the risk gets so high, the cost gets so high, that insurance is a very challenging mechanism to use to send the incentives that we typically send to reduce risk. So that system-level focus, that ecosystem, is going to be absolutely critical. I hope we can move from a vernacular from insurance being a pricing mechanism to insurability, which is a shared accountability for risk and risk reduction across the value chain. And hopefully we can start to not check the box where this one affects diversity, this one affects agency, whatnot, and start to see more holistic offerings out there, not just from the insurance sector, but from government, NGOs. We look forward to working with a lot of the partners here as well. And this is a partner we worked with a few years back, and I look forward to hearing your comments as well.
Fantastic comments. I love your reflection that insurance is not going to save us by itself. It actually, we need to have like a public discussion, a public set of priorities, and a sense about what we should be really focused on. They're reflecting especially on the Spanish central bank runs a special agricultural insurance program for Spanish farmers, especially around drought issues. It's gone bankrupt 3 times in the past 20 years. And what they have recently realized is actually they are reinforcing unresilient, unadaptive behavior. And they actually need to not just keep paying out, but they probably need to pay out a little bit more so they can actually change behavior so that they pay out less in the future. That's a strategic shift in actually the role of insurance itself. And I think like a potentially really important signpost on the way.
Yeah, even any American here who lives in a floodplain has the same issue. We have a quote-unquote insurance company called the NFIP that's bankrupt. It goes bankrupt for years and years and years and never gets paid. And so yeah, I mean, these issues are complex and they require, again, a system level, all-in type of approach.
Thank you. Rajvi, I'd love to hear your reflections as well.
And namaste and greetings to everyone present here. I belong to the Self-Employed Women's Association, which is a trade union of 3.2 million informal women workers across 18 states in India. Today we have all gathered here to discuss the relevance of resilience must-knows into our daily lives in context of climate change, increasing threats and vulnerabilities. But climate change, as of now, we all know that it's no longer a distant threat. It's no longer a distant threat, but it's in the very livid realities of all of us, including our workers. And it's not only their livelihoods that get impacted, but our members have stated that it's their health, their food security, their children's education, everything else put together. And in terms of climate shocks impacting their lives, it's not only heat, but it's unseasonal rains, it's hailstorms. So there will be hailstorms in salt pans where it has never rained in a span of say 15 years and all of a sudden there are hail showers. What are these salt pan workers going to do? Similarly, there are issues wherein their livelihoods get slashed by 30 to 50%. It's a huge amount for someone who's just earning 300 rupees a day and just to put food on their family's plate. Let's just put aside what they are doing about their food. Like the women might not even consider having a meal because it's their intrinsic nature to care about the family. So resilience must-knows have already been prevalent into all our interventions. And at SEWA, we have an interconnected bundle of solutions that have been put together, and all the 3.2 million members have come together and started a Cleaner Skies campaign, which we in localized term call the Swachh Akash campaign. And it focuses on 4 main pillars, starting from education and awareness, which focuses on what is climate change, why climate change, what are the different impacts. The next is data. Data is very, very crucial. We all know that there is climate change. We all know that there are adaptation and mitigation measures, but what are the impacts? What are the impacts on the informal sector workers, on their health, on their livelihoods? All that needs to be put together for us to tailor those solutions. What are the effective measures that have already been implemented? That is very important for us to gauge. We cannot stand up and say that, oh, I'm going to scale up X initiative because I like that. But it needs to be in a relevant mechanism for what exists on the ground. The next is linking members to innovative climate finance, which includes linking them to parametric climate insurance, linking them to returnable grants, so that risk mitigation and risk transfer both work hand in hand, linking members to early warning systems, linking them to green villages and green world, wherein they are adapting green technologies to minimize their losses, to be able to build resilience against climate change. And all this put together, in addition to us having a health response for them, is very important. So this year we piloted, for the past 3 years, we have been having a climate insurance in place, which focuses on minimizing their individual losses. But moving forward, we envisage to have a climate welfare facility wherein parametric insurance will be the key driver. But in addition to that, there will be savings, there will be credit, there will be returnable grants, early warning system, climate and health, climate and mental health, which often gets unnoticed. So all this put together, we want to build an economy of nurturance where there's agency, there's diversity, there's interconnectedness, and people will willingly put together all the knowledge that they have in scientific manner to thrive against the climate shocks.
A great story, and I think part of what you're also saying there is that if we're not careful, that actually like a single climate impact, even a small one, can kind of ripple, can have a cascade of impacts across the community, maybe even across the whole economy. And that our goal should not just be to like protect people, to reduce risk, it's actually to build wealth. And we need to be thinking about prosperity in that sense, which is a very powerful message. I'd like to bring up the next 3 speakers as well. Professor Timon McPherson. Okay. Great. Yeah, please. Thank you. You didn't want to come? Yeah, I appreciate your effort. And Professor Reggie Ferreira. Wonderful, thank you. And Dr. Fatima Denton. Thank you. Please. We're going to pivot a little bit. These are three members, like all very distinguished scientists of different types of science as well, who contributed to the Resilience Must Knows. A quick introduction. Timon McPherson is professor at the Urban Systems Lab at New York University, a researcher at the Carey Institute of Ecosystem Studies, Stockholm Resilience Center, and the Bayer Institute of Ecological Economics in Sweden. Reggie Ferreira, director of Tulane University's Disaster Risk Resilience Leadership Academy, and ED for the Consortium for Emergent Disaster Resilience, and a fellow at Stellenbosch University. And Dr. Denton is the director of the United Nations University Institute for Natural Resources in Africa, based in Ghana, I believe. Is that right? Yeah, fantastic. So we haven't launched the Resilience Must Knows. We had an image of them up earlier. It might be actually useful to put that back up if that's all right. And we've had a little bit of a sneak preview of them. I want to start actually by asking Francis, are there in the process of co-developing the Must Knows, were there things that you saw maybe in a new light, or that with a different perspective as a process of reading the comments and the reviews?
Yeah, I kind of touched on it in my opening, but the tension between scaling and what that means and the agency issue in particular, because scale, you deal at big levels, and then add another level of complexity in that these are hyper local solutions. So, you know, we're pushing for system level scaled solutions, and the closer you get to achieving that, the further you get away from local agency, because you have to deal with larger and larger constituencies. So that was an area that really kind of came to light as I kept trying to rearrange the 9 to see where the clashes are, where the consistencies were. And that was one that kind of came to heart for me as well, because we're doing a lot of work and trying to scale approaches to capturing that resilience dividend. And it opened my eyes maybe a little bit to understanding what we might be missing. And I've had the good fortune of chairing a nonprofit that does a lot of resiliency work, and for the last 15 or 20 years, they've been opening my eyes to that as well. So it's certainly something we're going to have to be aware of, that tension between scale and agency.
Fantastic. I'd like to maybe turn to Fatima, and then I'll go to Timon and Reggie. I'm curious, Fatima, like you've engaged with this with resilience as a transdisciplinary science, and could you say something about your own background and how you felt like it needed to integrate with other types of sciences in this concept, the relatively new concept of resilient science?
Thank you. Okay, it's working. Yeah, so I've been sort of working on adaptation resilience, I would say, maybe for the past 20 years. But that said, I've always been curious about our definitions of what resilience is. I mean, I think Sibel mentioned some of those today, from, I guess, a baseline of being able to absorb shocks. So it's always external, but we can even contest that as a theory. Our capacity to adapt And that sort of very ritualistic line, which she talked about, which is along the lines of ability to bounce back. And I guess that for me, the way I see the climate diplomacy and even conversations going is that we're becoming almost intuitive about resilience. We're not nailing it down to what exactly does it mean, and what does it mean not just from a scientific perspective, but what does it mean for ordinary people? You know, would we recognize it if we see it? And I think that sometimes we feel that we are the holders of knowledge, especially where resilience is concerned, but rather we have a lot to learn from others who have been practicing resilience for a long time. So I think in terms of transdisciplinary, social scientists, I guess, have a lot also to contribute to the conversation, because we can't also just talk about resilience in terms of biophysical terms. The social vulnerability element has always been very important. But we also got to recognize there's a bandwidth where resilience is concerned. And there are certain things currently that is cutting that resilience supply to some people. When we talk about, you know, a carbon leakage potentially to Europe through the European Union Green Deal, and a ban or a levy, rather, is imposed on countries, that's cutting the resilience flow. When we talk about stranded assets, and we basically say, well, much of these countries in Africa, irrespective of their supply in oil and gas, might not have a long window and might have to start looking at alternative forms of clean energy, we are also constraining that space they have to manage themselves out of an exit that would allow them, you know, a stronger resilience bandwidth. So I think that the instruments of how we conceive of resilience, the power dynamics of who's resilient, where does it come from, where is it sourced, you know, and how do we enable better resilience for those countries who, you know, from a perceptual perspective, we think that they have supplies of resilience, but yet they don't. You know? So I think there are all of those things that we need to consider, so that when we think about it as a science, it's actually more diverse. There is a plurality of resilience, and not just sort of looking at it from one-dimensional perspective.
Fantastic statement, and I think really saying that this is not just a transdisciplinary approach, it's actually like a profoundly multi-level approach. It's about really learning from like a very large span and set of bodies of knowledge, which may be formally organized, or they may be organized in various communities, and having something that's coherence in that process. Thank you. I'd like to turn now to Reggie. One of the points that we heard in the previous segment was that resilience, I would say, is a word in English. It's in pretty rapid evolution. I think that's also implicit in Fatima's statement. Like traditionally, 100 years ago, someone would have said resilience is about bouncing back. And there still are a lot of people that see resilience that way. But that's not what's reflected in the resilience must-knows. And I wonder if you could reflect on that, and especially maybe how it fits in with, say, disaster risk recovery approaches too, which very much are kind of organized traditionally, at least the last few decades, on that kind of bounce back viewpoint.
So good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. Excuse me. So sort of linked to your question, and where I see sort of gaps or sort of something that's usually overlooked is probably resilience must-know number 9. Too often, communities are left behind, especially in the disaster context. You know, communities are often told what to do instead of being asked, what do you want? You know, so that's sort of, especially in the disaster resilience and disaster risk reduction field, that is a major issue. There's too much imperialism, and even in the US it's happening. We just had the 20-year remembrance of Hurricane Katrina a couple of weeks ago, and just hearing some of the stories and some of the mistakes that has come about, we can just in general do a better job when it comes to including communities, when it comes to planning, and yeah, the Resilience Must Knows is hopefully a roadmap how to achieve just a better path forward, that we ensure no one gets left behind. And sort of back to your question as well, where the field has come for us in the disaster resilience field was the vulnerability paradigm. And the vulnerability paradigm has been sort of omitted at times when it comes to resilience. So it's important that we still acknowledge the deficits that communities experience. So yeah.
Thank you, and I like that you went immediately to the issue of power imbalance and equity, and making sure that the community feels agency, that they may have different choices than they were aware of before. They may not have great choices, but they need to exercise agency in that process of helping to be able to define and implement resilience. Very powerful idea. Timon, like you work with complex urban systems. Cities, by their nature, are dynamic, historic systems. They're complicated systems, especially large cities. And I'm thinking here number 7 and number 8, align actions and negotiate trade-offs across scales and interests, and support and develop agency. Maybe as a kind of reflection, actually, in what we just heard from Reggie too. Like, how do you see those playing out at that urban landscape scale?
Well, I think one of the trade-offs that Francis brought up, and I want to dig into a little bit, is this trade-off between empowering people who may not traditionally have decision-making power, giving them agency, or even devolving how agency is normally thought of, and scaling up, right? And so I'm going to be very specific and just talk about New York City, since we're all here. Maybe you know this city really well, maybe you don't. One of my roles is as co-chair of the New York City Panel on Climate Change, and this is a legislated body required by law to advise the city on climate policy, on climate planning. And one of the things that we see here are these trade-offs, right? So how do you navigate these trade-offs? And I'll give you a very specific one. One is thinking about how we can move towards decision-making that is in the hands of communities, that is in the hand of advocacy organizations, and then just the way the city government tends to work. So one of my colleagues in the city who heads up a lot of resilience efforts, his name's Rit Agrawal, and what he leads the Department of Environmental Protection. And what he always says is, like, most of these concepts make sense. The agencies get them, the agency folks get them. It's actually, how do you do it on a daily basis? What do you build? What do you change in your process? And the trade-offs here are really tangible. It's a big city, it's a complex place. And so thinking about how, for example, you might change decision-making power over the budget. And then, as we talk about, communities, they know what they need. You can ask them, they'll tell you what they need. But then the next step is allowing them to be able to spend the money and make decisions around that. So there's been a lot of amazing advances in participatory budgeting, for example, but it's very small scale. The experiments have gone really well. How do you scale that up? That's really difficult, because that whole process is about giving communities agency over the decision to spend, but they still don't get to do the spending. Then the government will do that, right? Actually moving the funds into the power of communities is a really difficult challenge. And just to be really specific about it, there's a kind of simple effort you would think. How do we help local landowners, building owners, get access to funds to plant trees and put rain gardens in their backyard, to be able to cool their own backyard, which could help cool the neighborhood, to be able to absorb stormwater so there's less water on the street? Well, you need to be able to show that whatever they've invested in has worked. And so that means that the government doesn't want to pay until it's proven that it's successful, right? Even though the interest is there, it's difficult to kind of work through these steps. So I'm just bringing, some of this resilience work the devil is in the details, and it means everyone's got to be involved at all of these different layers to try to actually navigate, how do we get resilience done? How do we empower communities and allow that agency to build? means the lawyers have to be involved, the economists have to be involved. It's not just sort of talking points, right? And I think that's actually the real work ahead of most of us.
I'm curious, just as a follow-up question, do you see this as an area where cities need to be learning from each other about how to do this? I think it'd be very easy, let's say you're based in the U.S., to just look at other kind of peer cities in the U.S. rather than looking at lessons that may be emerging from Southern Africa, maybe emerging from East Asia, that they're confronting similar kinds of challenges.
Well, that's easy to say yes to, that we can all learn from each other. I think that's what this is about, right? So hopefully we've got plenty of time to meet over coffee and in the hallways to share some of that. And it's not just about the agency question, it's about any aspect of resilience, right? I think in New York, we've really taken to heart that it wasn't just Hurricane Sandy and coastal storm surge that we have to worry about. It was really understanding that extreme rainfall is a problem. So how do we look at this complex problem of water? And so we've looked to the Dutch, and we've been really trying to learn from a lot of other approaches in places where people have been, well, navigating that challenge for a while, and we're learning so much from them, right? And we're copying, and in some cases we realize what you can't cut and paste, right? It doesn't work here exactly the same way. So again, easy to say yes, we should all learn from each other. I think even more so, not just what works, but what were the challenges? How did you navigate them? Because we may have something similar.
Can I pick up on that? Because we have a New York City example as well. You may be aware of it, may not be, but we work with a local community NGO to create a program to provide flood insurance to low-income individual and homes that were not covered by flood, but very exposed to flood. And it's a new concept called community-based catastrophe insurance, where through a parametric, we can actually insure multiple people under one policy. A few things went wrong here. In order to kind of control the money, the agency we were working with, for all good reasons, said they would rather have the money than the individual. So your agency issue just popped its head, right? One. Two, the city wanted to have bells and whistles. The New York finance, the regulator, the insurance regulator, decided after all that it wasn't an insurance product. So we had to. So my only point is alignment isn't there. We're not even every entity that was involved in this transaction was well-intentioned. Everybody was well-intentioned. But some were saying go left, others were saying go right. We got it funded through a generous philanthropy for 1 year. Imagine, so it didn't pay out, right? Which is a good thing, maybe, because there was no flooding. But because it didn't pay out, people questioned the value. So my only point. Yeah, it's kind of funny, but it's not really funny because it's at the core of this question of how do we get sustainable finance for all of these projects that actually would have a lot of benefit for all communities.
A great point. Please, Rajvi.
I would like to add on to this conversation. Like, while we are talking about communities and building resilience, participation without power is of no use. When we are asking the communities to participate in the decision-making process, we need to have a bottoms-up approach. And for that, they need to have the agency. While we are designing an insurance product, we should ask them that what are the climate shocks you need to get insurance about? What are the temperatures that impact you the most? Is it only the heat, or is it humidity as well that is impacting you? Or if we are saying that they need access to health, but they might not have access to the healthcare facility nearby during a climate shock. And hence, there needs to be a lot of capacity building, involving them and providing them with agency by training them as a cadre of, let's say, health ambassadors or climate entrepreneurs or solar technicians, and equipping them not only with skills, but data as well. Like, as of now, we are all as a part of scientific community, we are all collecting data. But where is that going? Is it getting translated into layman's term? Is it reaching them? Do they know, like, they were a part of, let's say, X survey. They responded to it. What came out of it? Was it in their benefit? Was it something that we tweaked based on their inputs? So all that needs to be taken into consideration, and we need to include capacities which build up on their collective bargaining strength. They should have access to their own self-help groups. They should have access to their small own circular economies so that there is no hyper dependence on one supply chain, wherein they are the producers and managers and owners of their own circular value chain.
Very eloquently said. I think you're actually showing the kind of community level implementation that Timon is also saying has to happen for communities to really feel empowered, that they can feel active. That part of our view of a system may need to be to create a new social system, actually. And that is clearly what CEWA is involved on the ground and being able to implement. I'd like to turn and open it up for 2 or 3 questions. Then there's hands immediately. So we'll go here and there, and we have microphones. Yeah, we have one coming. So the 2 ladies with scarves. We'll go with the light-colored scarf first. Okay. If you could say your name and organization, please.
Sure. My name's Wendy Chamberlain, and I'm a consultant working with an INGO called Trickle Up. I'm also a fellow with the Atlantic Council of Climate Resilience Center. The more I work on resilience, the more confused I become. And part of that is because we talk about resilience as a linear equation. The language up there talks about a bit of a cyclical process. But the more I spend time in communities, when we talk about resilience with communities, they want to talk about lack of infrastructure or sending their girls to schools with teachers. And so why I get confused, and I want to hear your perspective, is that what are we willing to consider as in scope for the resilience conversation as we talk about systems as well? And where do we draw the line between out of scope? Because sometimes from the community perspective, it is truly everything. And once they can think about how these other facets of their life are integrated, then it becomes a conversation that they're willing to engage in, because these other elements are equally as important as responding to a drought or as responding to a flood. And so I may have now added more confusion to this conversation with my wondering comments, but I'm curious how you think about these other elements that don't fit the linear sort of way that we talk about resilience.
Fantastic question. And maybe we'll take a second question right away and maybe have like 1 or 2 answers for each one.
Thank you. Natalie Spittler from Poco University in Vienna, and I work with the Club of Rome, and there we've recently started modeling, so I lead modeling work there, on social tension, and we use this to do societal resilience assessment, because I think we often look at resilience in terms of resilience to certain natural hazards, but also what's the resilience within the society. And this has been raised several times, and something that came up in the event on Saturday also was, are we lacking valuation methods of resilience, right? We're really good, and that was also, I think, in the panel raised, at evaluating risk and calculating risk, but how can we calculate the value of resilience? So I'm wondering what your approach would be to this.
Super. So two questions. The first one is, if we think of resilience as a linear pathway, then like we may, as someone supporting a community or a place or a technical team, like we have a certain vision of what resilience should look like. But maybe they come to us and say it's something completely different. And their performance indicators are not easily reconciled with the way that we are targeting our work. And the second question is, okay, these are great, but how do we know if we've done a good job? Like, what's the scorecard? And what do we count to tell us if we've succeeded or not? Is that right? Yeah. Please.
Yeah, I can go on the first question. It's really resilience to what and resilience to whom. Unfortunately, there's a lot of terminologies and definitions that's been coined for resilience. I was a pre-doctoral scholar in 2009 at the United Nations University in Bonn, and we were introduced to 72 definitions back in 2009. Fast forward 16 years later, there's probably 720 definitions now. So I guess resilience to what, resilience to whom, and then really just putting up the guardrails and coming up with a definition in general. But resilience is so interconnected, from an individual, household, and community perspective. And then the community at the end of the day has to prioritize what's their main need. So.
Can I just add to that? I think the other part of your question was what's in scope and what's out of scope. And just to give an example of it, probably you have very similar analogous examples. Some of our work in Harlem and the South Bronx here in New York, we've gone in and said, okay, let's talk about climate adaptation. Let's talk about climate risk. What do you need to respond to that? And the answer was job security, food security, housing security, energy security. That's what we need. I think similar to what you're speaking to. And so they're all in scope. Right? This is one of the, I think, major challenges is that resilience is a huge umbrella. It's very hard to have a boundary that says this is not part of climate resilience or this is not part of food resilience within a community or at any other scale because it's so interconnected. And that's why we're taking this really intentional systems lens on how the resilience must-knows have come through, because I think that's well recognized now. It was very siloed. The governance is still very siloed. The sort of decision-making is still very siloed. So in my view anyway, that's where the work needs to happen, because it is all in scope. So how do we get the housing department to work with the parks department, to work with the resilience office, et cetera, to make sure that we're not, say, building luxury parks in low-income neighborhoods that are causing displacement, but at the same time we're putting housing security measures, subsidizing housing, and that these things are happening together. We don't want to just not do it, right? So this to me is the challenge. It's not that it's linear, it's that, or that the scope needs to be narrow. It's that we have to figure out how to deal with the intersectionality of all of these competing challenges.
Fatima.
Yeah, so I was struck by the word everything. And that makes a lot of sense, because when you do go and talk to communities, it's an everything matter. They don't have boundaries. They don't have these intersections that we have. They see it as, an all-encompassing thing. So I think we have to start from that definition of everything, because that gets us closer to having some sort of a graduated approach in terms of how we deal with resilience. But I think the more we think about resilience, the more we have to think about not just agency, but as I said before, understanding where these sort of epistemic power relations are coming from. We need to even go into a political economy of what resilience is. Who wins, who loses, and think also about what is the effective governance, because often we're selling that to the community. We're not looking at their own model of governance to basically say, how does this help us now get into a more effective type of resilience? So that's a nice reminder to say, come to a close. Yeah, but honestly, I think we could have another, like Reggie was saying, another 20 years of resilience with, a whole suite of definitions. But if that doesn't really work for communities, then it's more or less a textbook approach of resilience. It's that linear way of looking at resilience. But we need to go and understand what are the structural and systemic barriers that are holding people vulnerable, that are trapping them into this cycle of vulnerability. I mean, it's an insurance policy, but doesn't offer premium, So how do we fix that? So I think that's the basis of the question that we need to ask. Bringing community on board means that we need to really understand what is the kind of insurance premium that they're looking for, and how do we adapt that to the current realities?
Can I jump to the second question?
Please, quickly.
Because it's something that we're struggling with, and we're trying very hard, and I'm part of a few pilots, failing pilots, let's put it that way, but we're still trying to do exactly that, to measure the value. Now, the insurance industry has come out with reports about every year and a half, saying it's $6, say, for every dollar, 11, 10, 8, 9, 12, 50, whatever the hell number you want. I can show you the report, and if you want another report, we can get another one done. Who cares, right? What matters is how much money can we create, how much economic value can we create from the actual intervention and then somehow spend that to reduce the risk. And we have pilots where we're trying to do that through novel forms of insurance to try to capture scale level benefits of reduced risk. It's not easy. And I beg the science community, to focus on that one, because if we can figure this one out, we can actually fund the risk reduction. Because right now, nobody is stepping up. We don't have a ministry of the future with an unlimited budget, right? That doesn't exist. We need one, and it comes in the form of the dividend that you get from investing in resilience. Not reports. It doesn't come, there's not a single report that has generated a single dollar for resilience. But there are projects that can be done and financed in a way where you can extract the economics now, pay for the resilience, and do it. And we've got to start actually implementing those kind of projects. So it's a challenge, but it's probably, to me, it's a challenge that if the insurance industry can fix anything, that would be the one, because we'd be creating financing for a whole bunch of different solutions.
A round of applause for our panel, please. I think this last point is a fantastic one, and actually kind of raises to me some of the larger issues that I've also been in the adaptation and resilience space for a long time. I started working on, as a scientist in this space in 2003 and transitioned to adaptation and resilience in 2007. And one of the transitions that I've seen over my career is like a discussion that was really only focused on risk. And risk is something like there are thousands of risk scorecards that are publicly available. We can to some degree, like we can measure risk, like we can measure barometric pressure or temperature. But resilience is not something that we can measure. And resilience, I think one of the most important words that's on the must-knows is trade-offs. That's a very profound idea, right? Like that means it matters who's in the room, who's making the trade-offs, who's balancing these issues, and who actually shows up and really cares about the issues. And I think that's a big insight. The one other point maybe is, I'll start with a question. How many of you can prioritize climate resilience, the resilience of democracies, the resilience of Ukraine right now? Like there's a lot of bad things that are happening right now. It's also really interesting to me. I was not involved on the resilience must-knows. Climate change is not mentioned once on the resilience must-knows. And I think what I infer with GRP is that they are raising resilience to a higher level here. That they're actually thinking about, we need to be resilient to a vast array of shocks and stresses, right? We can't just separate out the climate part and think that we can just fix that. Actually, it's all intertangled. And there's a traditional bias that we've had in problem solving, at least in the West, where we've wanted to solve a problem by making it small. And I think that what I infer from the resilience must-knows is that we have to solve problems by making them big, and seeing those interdependencies and those linkages. So I'm really grateful for the chance to be able to speak. I thank the GRP, and I'd like to hand the floor over to Sibel for your final comments. Thank you.
Well, thank you, John. And I will just take 1 minute, actually, and we'll leave the floor to you, Jesper, for the closing. I think, John, you said it all. It was actually intentional that climate change was not in the Resilient Science Must-Knows, and it was exactly because of that, because we didn't want it to be just bounded to climate resilience. We wanted it to be thought about broader resilience that would address sort of like the really interconnected risk landscape that we are living today. So it's not just climate, it's a variety of risks. But I think that from what I heard here today, it's like, I think we talked a lot about the challenges really, and how these conversations are difficult. And there were a lot of issues that came up, who pays for it, You know, how can you even like think agency is not just participation? How can you even think about agency without power? And then you need to confront that. And these are like very, very difficult challenges, but I think these are sort of also the questions that are really needed to be discussed. And yeah, we hope that this gives you a little bit of an idea of what we're trying to sort of like achieve with this 9 Resilient Science Must-Knows. They will be launched at COP. So the report will be available then in November. Yeah, and I think that our idea is really that actually when you put these lenses, you should look into all of those. Very, very often, we are sort of like, and it's a consequence also about thinking about efficiency and like how can we efficiently do this, right? Like we are kind of like wired to think like this. But when we think too much like that, then the risk is that, you know, we think in building like one of these things or two. And actually like several of the organizations that we work at they excel at doing that, right? But the problem is that when we don't have the sort of broader systemic perspective that sort of like includes sort of all these things, or at least is aware that if we do not take these things into consideration, like if I don't take this into consideration, I can have a bunch of unintended consequences, no matter how good I am in sort of like doing like 3 or 4 of the other ones. And so I think to constantly sort of like challenge ourselves in putting this systemic lenses and this sort of like, I know when I do this, there will be trade-offs. You know, there will be unintended consequences. So who do I call to the table to actually negotiate this? And so those are sort of like important next steps and all the fantastic things that we heard from the panel, which I really want to thank. Jesper, just a final call to you. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming. And yeah, if you get curious, come and talk to us at the coffee break.
Thank you, Sibel. Thank you, John. And thanks everyone else who were up here before. It's just me between you and a break, so I'll be very quick. Just want to highlight, it's really cool, really, that one of the main things that Wanjiro brought up was really point 9, right? If you don't fix that, then you don't really fix anything. Super important. Rich, candid discussions, really appreciate it. We need this interrogation. We need to leave our comfort zones. And we might live lives where we actually leave our comfort zones just by turning on the news. I'm definitely one of those. But we need to stay in this discomfort because that's the only way we can solve these issues. Before we break, just a minute. We've been working how do you turn this into practice. So we have one thing that we'd like to mention today. It was launched a few weeks ago, but we'd like to just mention it to you so that you can spread the word as well. The Global Resilience Partnership and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development are proud to announce the launch of a new Climate Resilience Award for Business. These awards are designed to spotlight companies that are not only adapting to climate risks, but actively driving solutions that benefit people, nature, and economies. 3 categories: strategic leadership in resilience, for companies embedding resilience across operational or value chains. So that's really making it into a strategic issue. Have a resilience director on the board, for example. Partnerships and collaboration for initiatives where businesses work hand in hand with governments or communities to deliver adaptation. Or an SME award, recognizing smaller enterprises whose innovations are transformative. Entries will be judged by a panel of experts on innovation, measurable impact, sustainability, and scalability, and also taking what John mentioned, that how do you measure resilience, right? So it will take those aspects into consideration as well. Deadline is 18th of October, and winners will be announced in the lead up to COP30 in Belém and featured there. This award builds on GRP's long-standing work with the private sector, including the Prepare Call to Action, which is not called that anymore, carries that momentum forward through our new platform, Mobilizing Business for Resilience. Our aim is simple. We need to celebrate leadership. We need to recognize leadership. We need to elevate solutions, find more solutions, have more conversations, learn. Ideas build on ideas, build on ideas. Same with innovation. It's not that you come up with an idea and, whoa, you solved it, right? It's a process. So we need to really encourage that and give that the space it needs. So please encourage anyone you think is relevant. Share on LinkedIn or whatever it is that you do, because we'd like to get many applications. With that, I just want to say one final thing. Sorry, I had two things. And that is, please look at that, the harvesting of this conversation. It's lovely. I just went up and had a look at it. Thank you, guys. How you do it and how you capture it so nicely, I don't know. You have an ability that I completely lack. So coffee break, guys. I think the coffee break is in there. Someone shake their head vigorously if I'm wrong. Yeah, in there. Okay, someone nodded. Thank you.